Hello and welcome back to the Rugby Paper Podcast. With round one of fixtures of the European Champions Cup done and dusted, and with round two coming up this weekend, we welcome on Harlequins back rower Jack Kenningham to discuss Joe Marler's retirement, his own England ambitions, as well as Harlequins' big game 16 at the end of December. It's time to turn our attention back to domestic and European rugby. Plenty of talking points during early European action. It was a peculiar opening weekend, Storm Darragh being one of the reasons. Harlequins look to bounce back from a narrow defeat to Racing. They host the Stormers this weekend and are also in the run-in towards their big game at Twickenham against Leicester Tigers on December 28th. We do have a special guest from that team today. I do want to say, first of all, before we get into the crux of the podcast, that our thoughts and prayers are firmly with the family and loved ones of former England international Tom Voyce. In the storm of the weekend, his car was swept away, and although the car has been found by police, he hasn't yet. So although I think we're all probably fearing the worst, we are very much keeping our fingers crossed for the best. So hoping for some sort of good news there. Anyway, Jack Kenningham, hi, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for joining us. Are you calling us from home? Is it a day off today?
Yeah, calling you from home, day off today, which is nice. Slightly condensed week, actually. We're only training twice this week. I think just with the late game in Paris on the weekend and the travel, they felt like if they could condense it, it'd probably be best. Prioritise the recovery side of things.
Sure. So travel more than you coming up against one of the biggest teams in the Northern Hemisphere.
Say again, sorry.
It's travel the issue rather than you coming up against the biggest team in the Northern Hemisphere.
Well, yeah, don't get me wrong, they were big, and it didn't help that it felt like we were sinking into the pitch. It wasn't the best. I think actually Stuart Lancaster said that it was their last game on that pitch this year. And I think he also said that it probably wasn't a bad place to have the game against us. It probably suited them slightly. But yeah, a few battered bodies. Pretty disappointed, to be honest. But the beauty of the competition is you lose, but you can bounce back. And there's no reason why we can't continue and and push on through with a win this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, the feeling is the first half especially, you got 5 points from it, but it was something like 71% possession, 73% territory. I don't think Harlequins is known for not being clinical, but obviously it seems like that was the story of the first half. Do you think that was largely the conditions?
I suppose the conditions would have had an element to play within that. I think we were just largely very frustrated, but we probably didn't quite get our maul was working, but probably a few calling decisions on pitch that we got wrong. And just that final product, like you said, and we've been pretty good at it. We were looking at our maul stats this season. We have in the Premiership one of the best conversion rates from 7 meters out. So it was pretty disappointing, but we couldn't, make the most of, in the first half, all of possession and, the amount of entries we made into their 22. You come away and it's frustrating. And especially when you know that the game was there, for the taking. I mean, we really should have been up by a few tries going into half time, but they have some special players and it only takes, one line break from them and a couple silly offloads and you're all of a sudden back on the back foot. So, yeah, a bit frustrating, but nothing we can't sort out.
Jack, a lot of comparisons are being made these days with between the size of the French clubs, the size of the English clubs, the size of the French league, etc., etc. I mean, English clubs are always going to be, the best English clubs, and Harlequins are obviously one. They're always going to be pretty competitive against any of these teams. But is there a sort of feeling amongst the guys of your generation when you look across the channel that your Racings, Toulouse, Toulon, Bordeaux, La Rochelle, they're huge concerns now? I mean, they've got massive strength in depth in terms of players. They operate on big budgets. The TV deal in France is enormous by rugby standards. Do you get that feeling that they're a real heavyweight country to try and take on?
Yeah, there's definitely an element of that. Like the French teams are, I mean, the French league's fantastic, you know, and the clubs are massive, and the finances they've got over there mean that they are able to have that strength and depth and sort of larger squads, and it does potentially lead to, you know, that ability to compete on all fronts. But like you say, like that being like that, with all that being said, you know, when we're firing, and like all the Premiership clubs really now, when we're firing, we can compete with anyone. It's just that, you know, ability to be able to do it on all fronts, week in, week out. So yeah, I suppose we are a little bit handicapped. But I think that being said, when it comes to it, and I can't say that we've ever like thought like that going into a game, like going into Racing, like it was never a thought process of, oh, you know, they've got the budget, they've got, because actually when you go man for man, I think we believed that we were the stronger team. So I see where you're coming from, but then in the same vein, I'm kind of like, we definitely can compete, and as the Premiership's getting stronger, it's only making every team better, with every week just being a complete, you know, World Cup final.
How do you prep for a team like that then, whereby Nolan Le Garrec does things that no scrum half in the Premiership does? Joshua Tuasova is a different beast to tackle than arguably any centre in the Gallagher Premiership. And those two are obviously key to the Racing, not resurgence, because they were far behind, but you know what I mean. How do you prep for teams that have those sort of that stardust?
Yeah, I mean, there's an element of analysis that you put into every team that you play, whether it's Europe or Premiership. You know, when you're looking at someone like Tuasova, the strength of his ball carrying, his ability to offload, like he's world class, right? So it's things like, you know, you can't give him a run up. It sounds so simple, but like try and give him no space, because he's dangerous, you know. And it's similar with Nolan, like, you know, as running scrum half nine, you've got to be set around the breakdown. And we got caught a couple of times, and like you're gonna, like, it's a game of rugby, and when you're playing against world-class talent, like they're gonna get themselves into the game at some point, but it's just about being able to contain them. And I think for large parts we did, and then it was probably on our own like game that we didn't finish enough of our opportunities in the end, which is what, you know, ended up being our biggest enemy.
It must have been a slightly quieter game without Owen Farrell playing.
Yeah, definitely. It's disappointing because, you know, I think the conditions weren't great. We were actually expecting it to be way worse. There was meant to be, because, you know, well, obviously the Storm had hit the UK, and we were on the team bus, and we'd seen bits of the Saracens game against the Bulls where they were trying to kick to touch, and like the ball wasn't even making it. It was just ridiculous. And we were meant to get hit by those gusts, and we didn't in the end. It was windy and rainy, but it wasn't anywhere near as bad as we were expecting. It was probably the pitch in the end, which was just the biggest shock. Like, it was pretty bad, like very, very soft, made it just really difficult. But yeah, obviously it helped Owen not playing, because in those sorts of conditions, he can just command a game. So obviously it was, again, even more disappointing that we couldn't make the most of that, that he wasn't playing and get the result. But, you know, we beat a very similar team last year when we played them in the arena. So we know what we're capable of, and when you go back over it, it's frustrating. But we beat them last year, and then we lost to Toulouse at home heavily, and we made it to a semi-final. So we know if we flip that round, we've lost our first game. But if we beat Stormers next week, we're in the exact same position we were last year after the first two games, having won one and lost one.
Jack, do your coaches sort of stress to you both before and after that pro sport is absolutely a no excuses environment?
Yeah, of course. I think that's like driven within our environment. There is like, I suppose there's no excuses in terms of like your preparation and your effort and what you do at training when you're on the pitch, and everyone makes mistakes when it comes to the pitch. So that's fully accepted, and it's a team sport, isn't it? So the brilliance of rugby is you're there to bail out your mates when they need it. But of course, like, we have really high standards within training. High standards to do our analysis away from the club and get our recovery right.
Yeah. Just on Nolan Le Garrec, while we're still on him, Choy, I wanted to ask if you think he's resenting the fact he's French, because I think he would be starting almost in any other international side in the world at this point.
It's always the way, isn't it? I mean, if you have someone who's absolute, and rugby history is full of this stuff, actually. If you have someone who's pretty much undroppable, then it's pretty frustrating to be the second best when you be the best anywhere else. I mean, Warren Gatland never had a cap for the All Blacks. He was a bloody good player, because Sean Fitzpatrick, in the days where you didn't have tactical substitutions, Sean Fitzpatrick didn't get injured, or if he did get injured, he refused to come off. And there's loads of guys like that. So Le Garrec will probably be one of those blokes who ends up with 50 caps and 8 starts.
Yeah.
And as I say, the game's full of them. Joe Worsley was one, Nigel Redman was one. There were loads of people like that. Yes, frustrating, but you can't change the nationality unless you go somewhere else for 3 years.
Yeah.
Which is a different issue.
We'd have him. I don't know what his English is like, but we'd have him before. I don't know if he was chirping at you much, Jack.
There were loads of English scrum halves who couldn't speak English properly. I've interviewed plenty.
Would you care to name them, Chris?
Yeah. Scrum halves, he'll name them.
Absolutely not. I mean, much as I'd like to include Matt Dawson in that description, I couldn't. Austin Healy, he speaks Scouse.
Separate language altogether. Jack, it's interesting. Obviously, 10 years ago, if he'd lost the opening game, it would have obviously carried a lot of weight, and it still does carry weight. And I'm sure the team is looking to bounce back this weekend. But obviously, having pools of 6. We talk a lot about jeopardy on the podcast. Promotion, relegation in the Gallagher Premiership. This new format is still under scrutiny, and we're guilty of that. But I think it warrants its scrutiny. There isn't the jeopardy to every fixture that there was, and I just wonder, as someone who grew up watching the Heineken Cup in what was, let's be honest, its glory era. The 2008 final, Munster over Toulouse, Johnny Wilkinson, his swan song, I suppose. How does it feel being a part of a tournament that probably doesn't have the same stakes through the group stage and doesn't really kick into life properly until the knockouts? Is that a fair assessment?
It's tricky because, being involved in the games, it doesn't feel like that. But I completely appreciate that perspective of, you lose a game, it's fine, you can still get through, because that's sort of the position we're currently in. But every game is still such a humdinger. Like looking across, there was some seriously good games on the weekend. So I suppose I see your point, but then I'm also kind of like, the rugby's still fantastic, and the competition, like you say, most competitions, I suppose, I don't know the way you phrased it, but don't really get as excited. They get more and more exciting as you go on, right? That's the whole point until you get down to the final. So I hear what you're saying, and I get it. But having, I suppose, been involved, only really been involved in the Champions Cup since the changes properly as a player, I suppose I'd know no different. So to me, it's like, it still is so exciting playing in Europe, plus the odd game in South Africa.
Well, it's a far-flung part of Europe, without a doubt. South Africa. Continental shift is going on all the time. I think one of the good things about the format, and I think it has plenty of problems. I think qualification for the tournament is a problem for a start, but those of us who love the game and are sufficiently old to be old-fashioned about these things, although we try not to be too old-fashioned, is an extra round of knockout rugby is pretty good, and everyone loves the knockout side of things. We had those of us who were brought up on the John Player Cup and all that kind of business when it was the biggest thing. This was before leagues almost. Well, it was before leagues. That was the biggest thing in domestic rugby. So knockout rugby has a sort of frisson all of its own. And if you're going to have an extra round of that, then that's probably pretty good. I think that's exciting, isn't it? Knockout rugby is exciting.
Yeah, massively. I mean, I was injured, which honestly was absolutely gutting. But Quins went on a fantastic run. We did amazingly last season, and we got completely written off going to Bordeaux. Like, the boys went out there and nobody gave us a chance. It was one hell of a performance. And it sort of goes back to what we were saying earlier. It's like, so we can compete with the big French teams. It's just that ability to be able to do it every week. And then we got pumped by Toulouse in the group stages. And then we went there in the semi-final and it was really close. And it really could, in the end, Toulouse did fantastic well, went on and won the whole thing. But it could have gone either way in that semi-final, and that's like the beauty of it, I think.
It's a wonderful thing in knockout rugby.
I was just going to say that I think that the problem with the round of 16 is that so far in the 2 years that we've had it, I think that there has been one away win. So all the games, other than one, have been home wins.
Back in the day, that was the same in the quarterfinals, though, Nick. We went years without having an away win in the quarterfinals.
Yeah, but now we've got it around earlier. That sort of predictability is not good for any tournament.
But what's the alternative?
Well, the alternative is the old pool structure.
Yeah.
It's the classic of like you have to do well in the early stages to get that home game. So then it goes back to that point that you were saying. They don't, they actually are so important, even more so that you've now made that point of like, each game actually does hold so much. So it's one of those, it's like you take something away, but you bring something in. It's like a trade-off, and it's trying to find the thing which makes the tournament click. And it's difficult.
It's a good way of thinking about it, to be fair. I mean, we speak about jeopardy, even though obviously 4 of the 6 teams are going through, which seems like quite a lot. Only 2 of them will get a home fixture, which all of a sudden means that if you take the last 2 years, they have a 1 in 32 chance. No, that's not right. A 1 in 16 chance of going through.
Cambridge University, absolutely unbelievable, wasn't it?
I didn't do maths. I can tell you that for free.
Well, no, as you've aptly demonstrated. Well done. Well done, Archimedes. Carry on.
Yeah, thank you. But that's my point. That's maybe where the jeopardy comes from. It's just a less explicit jeopardy than obviously facing elimination. So no, I see your point. I think one issue I wanted to raise, and I think this is more for the spectator rather than the player themselves, is I think having the competition on Premier Sports is frustrating. And I haven't subscribed yet. I'll be honest. I had to watch highlights back. Nick, Chewy, have you got your subscription sorted?
I said my piece. I said my piece at the weekend, and
look, I mean, I've got my sub sorted, yes, and but my feeling is that at least it's on something, because at one stage it looked like it wasn't going to be anywhere.
But what does that say? We're sort of taking a silver lining when it's not one. Let's be honest. You have to have 2 different subscriptions in the UK or in England to watch, the two competitions.
I think you have to ask why there is no terrestrial bid for it. Why TNT decided that they weren't going to keep it. There are all manner of things that come into it. I mean, it's just that. And I'm afraid that, in my view, you've also got to look at competition structure. And I feel that, I take the points that Jack's made, and I certainly take the point that, when you're involved in a competition, you play the competition as it is for everything you can. But I do think that the sort of the tinkering with the format from the heyday of the European Cup, which was, far and away the best tournament, the best non-international tournament in the world, has reduced its appeal in one way or another. So, I think that looking at competition formats, as far as the whole game is concerned, competitions in pro sport, they are absolutely critical to the success of the sport. And I think that there is a lot of mucking around that goes on, which is more about, frankly, more about a commercial element than it is about the integrity of competitions.
That is absolutely it. It's always the tension between audience size and money.
Yeah,
and it's never even an argument in sport these days.
But now, Chris, the thing is that
I was with the late Eddie Butler the day, I think it was in 2001 on the Lions tour, when it was announced that the BBC had lost the Heineken Cup. In fact, they hadn't even bid for it. That was the truth of the matter. And it was that season when Leicester played Munster on a Sunday afternoon. I'm not even sure it was a knockout game. It might have been the last game of the pool stage. The BBC had 2.5 million. 2.5 million. That is way over 10 times more, even with my maths, Ollie, than anyone could expect now. I mean, God knows what Premier Sports will drag in. I don't know. I bet you they don't announce the figures.
But what's interesting is that we say that it's all about, that it's commercial interests that are taking over, and yet the reality is that the broadcast money is getting smaller and smaller. So that it underpins so much, and it's sort of lose-lose, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are multiple issues here. I think the point I was just trying to make is that it's frustrating having rugby in two different places, or certainly English rugby in two different places, which
about
five
different places.
Shame. 5 different places, sure. Jack, before we look ahead to this weekend, I just wanted to talk about your start to the season as well. Throughout, obviously, injury-free, touch wood. You're competing in a hell of a back row at Harlequins, which I think you must just find an absolute pleasure, to be honest. And obviously, well, you probably know that you're top of the Gallagher Premiership turnover stats this season. So, you must, on a personal level, be feeling pretty great so far.
Yeah, I'm feeling like I'm getting back to where I want to be. I think I've just been riddled. I had some really unfortunate injuries over the last couple of years. And it makes you really, really grateful for when you are fit and when you're playing, and how much fun and enjoyment you can take from it. Because there's nothing worse than being a professional rugby player and not being able to play any rugby. And I've done a lot of that. Obviously, started with my neck. I've had both ankles operated on, shoulder, a wrist. It felt like it was never ending. Last year, my ankle kept me out for most of it. I came down from a line out and quite nasty dislocation, a bit like Andy Christie did when we played Saracens, if you remember. So, you're going to get injuries with rugby, any sport, but particularly rugby. But for me, obviously, I'm just over the moon to be fit and enjoying it again. Really happy individually with myself, but personally from the start of the season, with how we're going. I think as a team perspective, from Harlequins perspective, we're really pleased with large elements of it. And honestly, it just shows how close the Premiership is, because we've lost some games by, honestly, like 1 point. First game of the season up at Sale, Northampton away, we had Bath home. 3 games that honestly we really should have, could have, and definitely feel like we should have won. So we're happy from that side, and we know we're going to have to kick on after the Stormers, of course, when we go back into the Premiership. But yeah, from a personal level, I'm just over the moon to be playing and really enjoying it, and just trying to make the most of every moment.
When you had your neck injury, Jack, I did read an interview with Adam Jones somewhere who said that your dad had thought you'd gone soft. In fairness to your dad, that was before he knew the extent of the neck injury, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Is that in any way true? Because I didn't actually.
His dad. So we dad had come into the changing room after the game, and me and Adam Jones have basically an ongoing joke about like my studs, because as a scrum coach, he wants me to have the biggest and the longest studs I can possibly have, and as a back row, it feels like I want to get around the park. I'm definitely not playing in molds, but I like to have slightly smaller studs. So we have a bit of banter, and Dad comes in, and I'm obviously sitting there in a little bit of discomfort with my neck, and I think Dom had made a comment or something like that, and Dad was just taking the piss out of me. I think we have quite a good relationship, and I don't know whether he was just enjoying the fact that he was in a changing room with Joey Flannery and Adam Jones and thought it was all quite exciting. And we walked, and yeah, we had no idea about the extent of the injury. Like, I walked off the pitch, I went round and had some pictures with fans after, and don't get me wrong, like, I was pretty sore through my traps and like my neck, it was hurting, but it wasn't really until Dad drove me to the hospital that evening in the smart car, and we were going over some bumps, and I was like in like quite a lot of discomfort. And then obviously after the scans, I got put on a neck board and a brace and was in hospital for a few nights until I had my operation. So all happened a little bit fast, but yeah, I can't imagine my dad calling me soft. However, I think it was something. I think it was something like that, because Bomb still makes jokes about it to this day.
Hey, laughs in the darkness, eh?
Yeah.
I suppose that is part of it. Is your dad your biggest fan then?
Yeah, I'd say he probably is. Yeah.
Even though was he soft?
Yeah, he tries to get to pretty much every game. I'm very lucky. I've got a very, very supportive family. My girlfriend and her family love coming to the games as well. So I'm very lucky. I've got a good support network.
Presumably you're a lot bigger than him. So if he calls you soft, I'm sure you can.
Well, I've started patting him on the head.
Okay.
And he really doesn't like that.
He doesn't.
He really doesn't like that. But so if he ever says anything I don't like, he knows that's what he gets.
He realises
just in terms, Jack, of the way the game's sort of developing in England. I mean, there was a time when Harlequins were probably far and away played at the highest tempo of any team, probably in the country. Now it seems that at least half the Premiership are playing a bewilderingly quick, what we used to call expansive game. I mean, Gloucester are doing it. Northampton patently are doing it. We're seeing a hell of a lot of it from you guys still. Bristol are sort of a bit off the scale with what they're trying to do at the moment. Do you sort of think you've set a bit of a trend, and now you're trying to keep up with people who have nicked your ideas?
Certainly to a certain extent. Obviously, that year we won the league, I think, again, nobody was expecting it, and the way we did it was just amazing, exciting, fantastic to watch, and we enjoyed it so much. And I don't think anybody expected it to last, but actually, it seems to be the way that rugby's gone a little bit, with that high tempo, offloading, attacking, running game. And certainly, you're seeing more teams doing it. So I suppose there's a little bit of we feel like we started off, but also, like you say, the team's doing it so well now. So we have to do it even better than we were before. And because everybody else is doing it, we're not the only ones. So there's just that competition. And it comes back to that competition where everybody in the league is so good now that there's no easy games.
No.
Speaking of speed, obviously Joe Marler, he
didn't have any.
Didn't have any.
Hang on. The prop supporter at the bottom here is going to.
Listen, I mean, if you go back to him early in his career, he was rapid.
maybe by your standards, Nick, but I think probably by
Certainly by your standards, Ollie, I'm telling you.
I think Nick is correct. Actually, I mean, it was an easy joke to make. It's an easy joke to make about any prop. But when he was in under 20s, around that time, he was remarkably quick across the floor.
Yeah, it's interesting. His body shape has changed over the years, and I actually mean that.
The aerodynamic haircut.
Well, that's true. It probably made it more streamlined. But Jack, what was mood like around the retirement? And how's the void in terms of chat and all the Joe Marlerisms that someone needs to sort of try and replicate at least? It must leave a lot of a hole in camp.
Yeah, there's certainly a hole left where Joe's gone. You know, I feel like first and foremost, we were absolutely gutted by the Bristol game, and you know, fair play to Bristol, but we didn't play well enough at all, and it was really disappointing because you know we wanted to send off Joe with a win, but thankfully he's such a legend of the club and of English rugby that it doesn't taint anything. You know what he's done. He sort of epitomizes Quins to a certain extent, you know, like with the way that he wants to play. And, you know, he's a prop, but he's the first person to be at training going like, you know, why are we kicking the ball? We want to play. So, yeah, he's a big character. You know, his jokes, you can't help but smile because sometimes he like saunters into the physio room and you're just like, oh no, like what's going to happen now? But yeah, you know, he's certainly going to be missed. He's a Harlequins legend. There is no replacing him. There's just trying to find ways to entertain ourselves, I suppose.
I mean, I don't know whether there's an immediate answer to this question, but what's your sort of most Joe Marler memory of Harlequins? I mean, it was in his final game.
It would definitely have been like big game when he had sausage on his hair, like he had it like cut so it said sausage on his hair, and I would have just been like, I'd have been much younger, like just watching Quins as a fan, and thinking like, what, and like, what's going on there? And also, he was a massive.
Wasn't he advertising somebody's business?
Jolly Hog.
Ollie Cohn's business. Yeah.
Well remembered, Nick.
And also, like, I mean, obviously the jokes and the, you know, what he would do, but also the year we won it and how influential he was when we won the league. You know, we needed our senior players to really step up that year, and he certainly led from the front.
Yeah, he will be seriously missed. I mean, I love the fact that obviously his last game didn't have, you know, the win send him off, but his clip with Luke, his interaction with Luke Pearce, was absolutely fantastic. And
I take my top off.
Yeah.
I saw him speaking to him, and I was like, oh god, I wonder what they're talking about. I'm just going to stay out of that.
Yeah. Just hope a red card doesn't get pulled out of Luke's pocket.
Yeah.
So what did you say? Listen, I am conscious of time. I'd love to ask about the back row and what it's like competing with Chandler Cunningham South, Will Evans, Alex Dombrand, and also the turnover side of things. Because obviously Will Evans is given a lot of credit for being the turnover machine he is. Obviously, you've got him at the moment. So is that a part of your game that you've
I've certainly worked on. I've always felt like it's a massive strength of mine. Like it's I feel like my super strength. So it's nice to be able to sort of prove it, I suppose, having had some time on the pitch now. And, you know, I'd imagine, and I don't know this because I get asked questions about like the breakdown and stuff like that, and it is tough to answer. But, you know, when you've got someone like Will on your team, often like opposition will be so concerned about him around the breakdown, but I don't know, maybe a bit of the success is that they're so concerned about him, I've managed to sneak in and take some. But, you know, I've always backed myself around that. I've always felt like it's something I can bring to a team. So, you know, I'm really pleased that that's going well, and just generally the game's going well. And then as for like the back row, you know, we were speaking earlier about strength and depth and like the French teams and stuff like that. You know, that's what we need. Like we need, and you know, back row, speaking from experience, it's attritional. You know, you pick up knocks, and to go a full season, you need to have that strength and depth.
Yeah, sure.
And you know, when I look across the Premiership clubs, you know, some probably Bath stand out to me, like the quality in the back rows at the moment and the strength and depth. And you have to have it. And obviously at the moment, whilst we're all fit, and long may that continue, it brings out competition. But all that does is it raises training standards. And if the club are able to, you know, rotate and get the best out of all of us, then it's only going to be a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the balance.
It's a nice balance you have, though. It's almost a classical back row balance with a really big, powerful six. You know, a couple of bandits on the open side. You're bandit in chief at the moment, and then a football in 8. I mean, it's almost old fashioned. That is.
Yeah, certainly. It's just great, and I feel like all the different combinations that we've got. Like bring something different, and it's so exciting. You know, we've also got like James Chisholm, who is such a fantastic rugby player. Honestly, he's an incredible ball carrier. One of if not one of the best in the Prem. He's fantastic, and he a bit like myself has struggled with injuries a lot. But he's fit and firing and playing fantastically this season, and will continue to. So, you know, it's just about almost how can we manage to keep everyone fit and everyone playing at their best, because God, it's a good back row if we're able to do that.
Do you see a little bit of a gap in the England back row in terms of, obviously Tom Curry's had his injury problems, but they don't necessarily, and Sam Underhill is obviously a phenomenal 7, but he probably isn't the turnover machine that some other 7s are. Is that a gap that you see?
I suppose I think England have a plethora of 7s at the moment in the Premiership playing well, young guys playing well, but just across the back row, like I feel like I'm a little bit unique. I think my line out, the reason I've played a lot at 6 this season is my line out. I really back myself with that side of it. I think I'm one of the best, if not the best in the Premiership in the back row in that line out stuff and my jumping. And I really feel like that's something which sets me apart. So whether that means I'm at 6 or 7, to me, it doesn't faze me too much.
Sure.
There's a lot of similarities to it. Being in the back row, there's a shed load of work to do, and you know that tackle breakdown stuff will stay the same whichever flank you're on. So look, I'm desperate to play for England. It's my dream. It's what I want to do massively, and I'm aware there's stiff competition. So for me, really, it's just I'm trying to be well, of course, play my best at Harlequins and put myself in the frame for international honours. But just remember, like, how fortunate I am to be able to play and to be fit. And I think the less you worry about it, the better you'll play, and the more chance that it will happen.
Back in the day, Jack, and to a certain extent they still do, teams like South Africa and France didn't always have specific 6s and specific 7s. They played left and right. You can argue that New Zealand, with the way Satiti has come through, will soon be in the same kind of position of just being able to play two all-purpose flankers. Do you think that's a way forward, or do you think the ship has sailed on that front?
No, I think it works, and it's just about getting the balance right, because you've got so many things to think about. With especially at international level, with your line out and then the physicality and the tackle and the breakdown, and then your ability to carry, you know, you have to be top at everything across the board, and everybody's going to have their strengths and something they're potentially not so good at. But regardless of whether it's not your strength or not, you still have to have it at an international standard, you know. So no, I don't think that ship sailed in terms of having all-purpose flankers, but I obviously appreciate why a lot of why on the international level you see a lot of, I suppose that, maybe a bigger line out 7, at 6, sorry, and then your breakdown specialist 7.
Very role specific, yeah.
Yeah, more role specific, but I think it can work both ways.
Yeah. Any conversations with Steve Borthwick just yet, if I can ask?
Yeah, he's sent me some stuff to keep working on. To give myself the best opportunity.
Can he tell a joke? Or it's a question we always ask on this podcast. We're all waiting for Borth's first joke. So,
no, I've just had a very helpful direction, which is what I really wanted on what I need to do to put myself in the frame for England.
Yeah, I can sort of see your eyes lighting up as you talk about it as well. So obviously, don't get me wrong, we are rooting for that first call up on your behalf as well.
Thank you,
Jack. Let's whiz through the quick fire question section, and then we'll do a little bit on the big game, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Probably try and be as quick fire as possible. I've literally looked at them. I don't think I've looked at them. So
that's more than most people.
I'll try not to waffle.
Nickname.
Kenners.
Best rugby memory.
Winning the Premiership.
Nice. Most embarrassing rugby memory.
Struggling to think of one. Kit name's got my name wrong on the back of my shirt a few times, which was, I don't know, I don't find necessarily embarrassing, but it's a laugh. It means I've got one over him. I get dangle and be like, well, you got my name wrong, so I think I need a bit more kit.
Is that 1 N instead of 2 or something?
Yes, exactly that. Yeah.
I was going to say that.
And then there was the third N was completely forgotten. So, yeah.
It's a bit dicey.
Yeah, exactly.
Pre-game tune.
Oh, I can be very chilled. Like country, like Morgan Wallen, if you ever heard of him. Wow. I need something to relax me because I get very, nervous, excited pre-match. So don't want to get too excited. Nice.
Post-game meal.
Pizza. There's this amazing place called Alley Cats, which do this unbelievable pizza. If you've ever heard of Crisp Pizza, it's a bit like that. It's amazing.
Really thin crust.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I know the one. Best player you've played against?
Tough. There's so many to choose from. I enjoyed playing against Evan Etzebeth when we played the Sharks. That was pretty cool. And then I'll go with him. He's a good one to have.
Best player you've played with?
Marcus.
Yeah. I forget, what was the difference in age grades? How many
Marcus
years?
Marcus is year above me.
It was year above.
We won the under-18s Premiership together.
Yes. And you were, and that was Caden was your 13.
Yeah, so I was in my lower sixth and they were in the upper sixth.
Yeah, that's a pretty decent cohort, that.
Yeah.
Favourite player right now?
God, it's difficult not to go for like Dupont, isn't it? Peter Steph-Dutoy, he's just incredible, I think.
He's quite good.
He's not bad.
Back row as well, appreciation.
I mean, you must see some parallels with your game and his, to be fair, obviously.
I try. I think that's a massive compliment. Yeah, I try. I love watching guys like him. He's amazing. I also went and watched England, New Zealand, and Wallace Atiti was just unbelievable. Oh my God, it was just masterclass.
Rugby idol.
I normally say 2. I've got Richie McCaw. I loved watching him growing up, what he did around the breakdown and stuff like that. I thought he was just like superstar. And then being a Quinn supporter, Chris Robshaw, to be able to come into the academy and, train with him was pretty cool.
Favourite stadium?
Oh, it's tricky. Obviously, the Stoop, which I can't say because it's the stadium I'm very lucky to play at. But God, I don't know. Played it.
I'll allow the stoop.
Yeah, you allow the stoop. We'll go with that then.
Favorite gym exercise?
Not my. I love playing rugby, not going to the gym, but I like the power exercises that we do. Things like squat jump, pretty boring. It's because I'm good at them, and I'm not very good at some of the other stuff. I get put to shame on.
You get a lot of
the coffee machine like some others.
Yeah.
Trust me, it would probably be that, but I'm glad I didn't give that as my first answer.
Superstitions.
They chop and change. If I play well, I'm constantly thinking about what I did and try and replicate it until I don't think I played as well, and then that goes out the window and it changes again.
Occupation if rugby didn't exist.
Something to do with sport. I absolutely love all sports, so I don't know, can't give you a straight answer, but it would be sports related. I love it.
PE teacher is what Cain Murley said when he came on, so you guys can form a little PE unit. Rugby law you would change?
Maybe just the box kicking stuff. They've already changed it in parts, but I just want to get more charge downs. So I'll be selfish and just say like less protection for box kicking, and maybe even less time, like 5 seconds. The amount of times the ref said use it, and you're counting down, and you're like, well, still is forever. Yeah. So maybe that, and maybe it'll mean I'll get more charge down. So works in my favour.
Yeah, stop turning scrum halves into goalkeepers. Make it fair game. Fair game.
Best thing about working in rugby?
Well, it's my dream, so that's pretty cool. I have to be pretty grateful if I get to do that for my job, and being able to go in like my best mates, being able to go in and enjoy the environment. I'm very lucky. Yeah.
Amazing. All right. Well, thank you for doing that, Jack. We'll just do a quick 5 minutes on the big game, if possible. Before we do, I just wanted to ask, obviously, some news out of the rugby world in the past week or so is Ilona Maher. I just wanted to ask how much that's being spoken about in the men's game. For those that don't know, she's the most followed star in rugby sevens, US, incredible player, very powerful, quick as well. She's got 5 million Instagram followers, and she's obviously been picked up by the Bristol Bears. Jack, obviously, it's so good for the women's game, but I just wondered how much it's being talked about in the men's game in terms of, whether you guys know her already.
Well, it's just like crazy the influence that I've already seen, like on social media, like the amount that she's like, it's like she is the most famous. She's the most famous rugby player like ever, really, with the social media sort of following that she's got. Obviously, she was doing like Dancing with the Stars, and she's come over, and it's just brilliant for the game. Like in general, obviously, the women's game will massively benefit from having someone like her come and join. She's all over my TikTok and stuff like that. So it's fantastic, and yeah, it's been spoken about quite a lot. I think we're all just a bit in awe of like her like celeb level.
Yeah.
Was she all over your TikTok, Nick?
Absolutely.
Like what's TikTok?
What's TikTok?
I can't move for her on Snapchat. Whatever it's called.
Lads, you're not helping the comment sections. They're calling us old. No, I mean, I'm sure you'll get to meet her at some point. But we're excited for her debut. I think she starts. First game will probably be in January, and then she's there for 3 months.
Yeah, I think it's the first game in Jan.
It's exciting stuff. Speaking of exciting, obviously the big game Saturday the 28th. Leicester Tigers this year. You won last year. It was close. You smashed Exeter the year before when you were involved. Rudimental at performing at the game. Talk about excitement levels, and also, is it weird having Christmas Day 2 days or 3 days before a game like that where you can't get it wrong, you know?
No. So firstly, yeah, it's so exciting. It's pretty much the first fixture that you look for as a Quins player and want to be a part of, because it's amazing. You know, I've seen they've sold over 70,000 tickets now, so hopefully we can sell the whole Twickenham out. So for a club match, it's just so special and so exciting, and a game that you massively want to be involved in. Also, like living in Wandsworth, I'm seeing like buses go past and it's just got big game advertisement on it all the time. And I'm like, God, I want to, like, every time I see it, I'm like, oh, I hope I'm playing in that. So yeah, it's a massive fixture for the club. And it's extremely exciting, particularly with how many tickets are being sold. Obviously been involved before, and it's amazing. You know, we walk over from the stoop and like basically the crowd like line the streets, and it's just some experience I can't really put into words. And having grown up, you know, having been to some big games when I was a mini, playing at Richmond, we played before the game at Twickenham. So we've got like pictures of it. I can't remember which game whether we were playing London Irish, I'm not sure. But there's pictures of me playing on the pitch, obviously in an empty stadium when I was young, you know, like 11 maybe. And, you know, then we went to the game after. So I have special memories of it.
Yeah. Amazing. And well, tickets are still available. I think it's £50 a ticket, something like that, which, you know, to get to HQ is not bad at all. I think last year you were up at 76,000, just over. So fingers crossed you can sell out this year.
Yeah,
that's half the price of the recreation ground.
I mean, it's not bad at all. And obviously, just very finally, Leicester Tigers. How are you feeling about them at HQ? Obviously, you're on a decent winning streak in terms of the big game itself. You presumably want to keep that going.
Yeah, of course. Like I said, it's an important game for us at the club. It means a lot to the fans. Leicester, you know, look, they're going really well this year. You know, new coach, very exciting. And they're going to be stiff opposition. It's going to be tough. But it wouldn't have mattered who we had, because it would be tough. That's just the beauty of the Premiership at the moment. So we'll be excited for the challenge, and hopefully we can keep the streak going.
And even if you sell out Twickenham, you'll still hear Michael Checker shouting from the coach's box.
Oh yeah, well, yeah, I imagine so.
No, it's going to be a great occasion. I've got my tickets, so I'm looking forward to it. And yeah, massively thankful for you coming on, Jack. Good luck this weekend. We probably haven't spoken about that as much as we should have, but go well against the Stormers. And obviously we're rooting for Quins in Europe and rooting for you with England as well.
Amazing. Cheers, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's edition of the Rugby Paper Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe on whichever podcast platform you use and recommend the show to your friends. The Rugby Paper is available to buy every Sunday, and to make sure you don't miss it, subscribe to our print, digital and online options at therugbypaper.co.uk/subscriptions. That's therugbypaper.co.uk/subscriptions to get all our content for as little as 14p per day.